Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being with us. My main concern is, I think, comment about while cargo volumes have dropped 60%, you see this as a temporary detox. But for a small business that's getting by day to day, that's much bigger. You talked about Main Street. We want to finally focus on Main Street, not Wall Street. I think you were at a global investor conference in Beverly Hills yesterday. That's the cocktail party where you mentioned the crazy Ivan theory. And before that, you were at a JP Morgan Chase World Bank private investor summit. All those things are not Main Street, right? Main Street is an auto body repair, a specialty printer. So my concern is on the tariffs. Who pays tariffs, Mr. Secretary? No. Answer the questions I asked, please. I only have 5 minutes. Who pays tariffs?
Sorry. Well,
who pays tariffs?
Sorry,
Mr. Secretary, please.
Excuse me.
The question is very simply, who pays tariffs, Mr. Chairman?
The dramatic increase in the effective U.S. tariff rate has become a major concern for both economists and business owners across the country. Historically, the United States has maintained relatively low tariff rates, particularly in the post-World War Roman II era, to support free trade and economic globalization. For decades, the effective tariff rate hovered around 2% to 3%, creating a relatively stable and predictable environment for importers, exporters, and consumers alike. However, recent policy shifts have disrupted that balance, with the effective tariff rate reportedly climbing to nearly 28%, the highest it's been since 1901. This surge is not just a statistic, it reflects a fundamental change in how the U.S. engages in global commerce. This escalation has not happened in a vacuum. It has been driven by an aggressive stance on trade negotiations, particularly targeting countries like China. The idea behind these higher tariffs was to pressure foreign governments into renegotiating trade deals, protecting domestic industries, and addressing long-standing issues like intellectual property theft and unfair subsidies. While these goals may be valid in theory, the strategy employed has led to widespread uncertainty and economic pain for those who are least able to weather it: small business owners and middle-income consumers. When tariffs jump from 5% to nearly 28%, it creates an overnight crisis for companies that depend on imports. Many businesses rely on materials or products sourced from countries now affected by these heightened tariffs. The sudden jump in costs forces them to make difficult decisions. They might have to find new suppliers, which is not always possible, or renegotiate contracts under duress. Often, their only immediate option is to raise prices, cut jobs, or reduce the quality of their offerings to stay afloat. This makes the market more volatile and reduces consumer confidence. Moreover, such a steep increase disrupts global supply chains. The United States is deeply integrated into a complex web of international trade, and when one link in that chain becomes significantly more expensive, the entire system is affected. Companies in the U.S. that manufacture goods often rely on imported parts. If those parts suddenly cost 28% more due to tariffs, the finished product also becomes more expensive. This weakens the competitiveness of U.S. goods both at home and abroad. The historical context also matters. Tariff rates have not reached this level in over a century. Back in 1901, the global economy looked very different, far less interconnected, and far more dependent on local production. In today's world, where supply chains stretch across continents and industries are interdependent, such high tariff rates are an anomaly and a danger. They signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. may be shifting toward economic isolation, which can trigger retaliatory measures from other countries. These retaliations can take the form of counter-tariffs, further squeezing American exporters and deepening the economic strain. Ultimately, the sharp rise in effective tariff rates doesn't just reflect a change in policy. It represents a disruption in the foundational principles of trade and commerce that American businesses have relied on for generations. The consequences of such an abrupt shift are still unfolding, but the damage to small enterprises and consumer wallets is already evident.
Tariff surcharge on things. And in addition to the tariff surcharge, guess what else got raised? American-made walnut plaques. that has nothing to do with tariffs, but companies take advantage and do that. So right now, we are getting screwed right and left because of the indiscriminate use of tariffs. That's the reality for Main Street. And you go off to Beverly Hills for private investor conferences and talk about crazy Ivan theories. Answer that. What is the crazy Ivan theory of tariffs that you mentioned at the summit?
Well, first of all, sir, I've had meetings with more than 50 small lenders. So I want to clarify that. I would also say that in game theory, strategic uncertainty, of which you seem to like the name Crazy Ivan.
Well, it's your words, correct? Didn't you use Crazy Ivan at the...
Well, you've used it 5 times. And
that's the question, Mr. Chairman.
I am saying that strategic uncertainty is part of negotiations. That should we say, here's what...
The drop in cargo volume by 60% is not just a temporary blip, it's a glaring red flag for the health of the economy, especially for small businesses that rely heavily on steady imports to meet their inventory demands. This sharp decline signals significant disruption in the supply chain, making it difficult for business owners to access the goods they need to stay operational. For some, this could mean empty shelves, delayed services, or canceled orders. The reduction in cargo movement directly affects the availability of consumer goods, industrial materials, and raw inputs. This shortage inevitably drives prices upward, placing additional pressure on both businesses and the customers they serve. When supply chains are disrupted to this extent, the ripple effects are felt immediately. Businesses that operate on a just-in-time inventory model, where products are ordered and received only as needed, find themselves particularly vulnerable. A 60% drop in port activity means delayed shipments, backlogged orders, and unmet customer expectations. For the holiday season, this situation becomes even more dire. Companies that rely on imported goods to stock up for peak demand periods like Christmas face the risk of running out of products just when consumer demand is at its highest. That loss of revenue during a critical time can severely impact a small business's annual financial outcome. In addition to the logistical nightmare of delayed or missing shipments, the reduced cargo volume creates a bottleneck that allows some companies to justify price hikes. With fewer goods entering the country, the principles of supply and demand kick in. Less supply equals higher prices. This impacts not just foreign-made goods, but also domestic products that require imported parts or ingredients. When prices go up across the board, it doesn't just squeeze consumers at checkout. It reduces the purchasing power of small businesses, forcing them to reduce their inventory or compromise on quality. This situation becomes even more frustrating when contrasted with official statements that attempt to downplay the severity of the crisis, referring to this drastic drop in cargo as a temporary detox. May sound reasonable in abstract macroeconomic terms, but to a small business owner watching their stock deplete and their costs soar, it feels tone deaf and detached from reality. These are not detox symptoms, they're economic symptoms of instability, and they hit hardest at the community level. When the Secretary of Commerce engages in such events and uses phrases like Crazy Ivan to describe economic strategies, it not only highlights the disconnect, but also underscores how removed these decision makers are from the practical consequences of their actions. While strategic uncertainty may be a clever term used in game theory or negotiation tactics, it translates into chaos for small businesses. These entrepreneurs need consistency, predictability, and clear rules to make informed decisions. They don't have the luxury of gambling with their futures based on vague, experimental economic strategies. The frustration is amplified when small business owners see their struggles being dismissed or misunderstood. When cargo shipments are delayed, when tariffs suddenly spike, or when prices rise unpredictably, they don't have time to attend forums or plead for clarity. They are trying to make a living. Their businesses often employ only a handful of people, yet they serve as vital pieces of the local economy, providing services, jobs, and community stability. When those businesses suffer, entire neighborhoods feel the ripple effects. Meanwhile, the very individuals responsible for setting trade and economic policy are surrounded by voices that often do not represent these struggling communities. They hear from financial analysts, Wall Street executives, and global trade specialists, but rarely from small, town business owners who are just trying to keep their heads above water. That imbalance in perspective results in policies that disproportionately favor large corporations and wealthy investors. Tariff hikes, for instance, might be spun as necessary negotiation tactics at an investor summit, but for a Main Street printer or furniture maker, they are a direct hit to the bottom line. Moreover, when these officials fail to provide clear, direct answers, like evading a straightforward question about who actually pays tariffs, it only deepens the sense that they are out of touch. The inability or unwillingness to speak plainly about economic consequences makes it harder for the public to trust their decisions. It reinforces the perception that those in power are more concerned with protecting elite interests than addressing the needs of everyday citizens. In the end, restoring trust and bridging the gap between Main Street and policymakers will require more than just public appearances and technical language. It demands empathy, accountability, and a willingness to listen, not just to those with billions to invest, but also to those with families to feed and dreams to protect.